One introduction RAWSEP view: the United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the eco-design wood stove, and international convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP view: PurpleAir PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Episode 57 DGY April 25, 2025. Apply for the PurpleAir PM 2.5 monitor donation to your community. In episode 57 DGY1, apply for the PurpleAir PM 2.5 monitor donation to your community. 2A RAWSEP Quick Takes on headlines: The New York Times, April 25, 2025 and April 24, 2025. 3 headlines: The New York Times, April 24, 2025. 3C man charged with arson in West New Jersey wildfire. A 19-year-old was accused of lighting a bonfire and leaving before it was extinguished, sparking one of the largest blazes in the state in decades. Main content: 1. Apply for the PurpleAir PM 2.5 monitor donation to your community. About the PurpleAir donation program, February 2024. This category houses topics related to the PurpleAir donation program. Vote on who should receive a sensor or submit an application. 1. To receive updates about the PurpleAir donation program, subscribe here. Program summary: The PurpleAir donation program is a sensor donation initiative that seeks to empower the air quality community with hyperlocal real-time air quality data. Through the program, anyone can apply to receive donated sensors. One of the core principles of PurpleAir is to deliver meaningful air quality data to our community. This program forwards that principle by providing sensors where you think they are needed most. What is the process? The donation program follows 2 main steps. First, we open program applications, allowing you to talk a bit about what you want to do with PurpleAir sensors. Second, we will compile those applications into a poll that you vote on. 1. Program applications: When we open applications for a new round of the donation program, you have the opportunity to respond and talk a bit about what you want to do with PurpleAir sensors. We provide questions that you will need to answer, but ultimately you are the one who makes your case. Remember, you are not trying to convince PurpleAir. Other community members are the people whose votes matter. When applications are opened, you will find the application post here. Donation program applications: PurpleAir community to the project poll. After the application period ends, we will compile those applications into a poll that you can vote on right here on the community site. This is where we really encourage you to get your community involved. Each person can only vote once, but the more people you get to vote for you, the better. When the poll opens, you will be able to find it here. Donation polls: PurpleAir community. 3. Wrapping up: After the poll closes, we will post the results and highlight the top selected applications. If yours is one of those, we will get in contact with you via email to arrange shipping and delivery. Interested in owning a PurpleAir? Purchase yours now. 2A RAWSEP Quick Takes on headlines: The New York Times, April 25, 2025 and April 24, 2025. RAWSEP view: A New York Times opinion writer is overawed by the pace of the Trump attempted destruction of the United States government. The editor of RAWSEP also has been prompted to pay attention to United States news at a pace she has never attempted before in order to document the extent of destruction being attempted by Trump. This is actually not good for the physical health of both of us, as the New York Times opinion writer can agree. If he can catch a breath and form that independent thought himself. There are much more mentally healthy activities to pursue rather than pursuit of a list of Trump activities. It would be more productive to physical human health to dance artistically in Penn Station rather than legally fend off efforts of Trump to disastrously take Penn Station over. The crony individuals leading destructive efforts along with Trump may also be acting at a fast pace, but their intended activities are thankfully being carried out incompetently by Hegseth and are tragically being carried out on a mass scale by Musk. So the overall evaluation of these activities should be condemnation at the pace, not at the pace. We are not discussing similarities of Trump actions to the artistic competence of oil paintings by Hitler. We are forced to discuss the sinister similarity of the pace of Trump government destruction to the pace of the march toward concentration camps led by the Hitler regime. Take time to appreciate the favorite painting by Carravagio treasured by Pope Francis Contemplate. The security breaches made possible by incompetence of Trump staffers and the security breach that occurred in Russia which made the blowing up of a car of a senior Putin official recently possible. Contemplate the fawning plea of Trump to Putin after Putin predictably upped his offensive on Ukraine in the middle of peace negotiations with Trump alone after leaving out Europeans and Ukraine. It to self from peace negotiations. Find out how the bright light of the Juilliard School is able to offer tuition-free classes in the midst of the Trump pullout for grants for educational institutions. Find out the legal flaws enumerated from the pens of the Trump lawyers themselves when analyzing the attempt of Trump to legally block air pollution fighting congestion pricing in New York City. Pick up the pace in the right direction. New York Times opinion writer. A fast pace in the direction of positive human values fighting to gain a foothold amid the bad news dumped on us daily. Destruction and evil is never brilliant. It is darkness and stagnation and backwardness at a time when we need to meet the future with the best intelligence that the United States possesses. Brilliance is science and medicine and education and use of the best minds to solve the problem first of climate change, then the problem of disease, and then the problem of the worst minds inexplicably in charge of what had been the most prosperous nation in the world until recently. Explain why that has happened. Find a solution to that problem. Solve that problem. That would be brilliant. The United States can do that and should do that at a fast pace. 2B headlines. The New York Times, April 25, 2025. United States and Trump opinion. The Trump single stroke of brilliance. The New York Times. United States Trump versus science. The New York Times. United States and Hegseth incompetence. Personal phone used by Hegseth created vulnerabilities. Analysts say the New York Times. United States and Musk. Elon Musk and savings by Doge may be erased by new costs. The New York Times. California. The Zuckerbergs founded 2 Bay Area schools. Now they are closing. The New York Times. Florida Democratic Party is dead. State senator says as he leaves it. The New York Times. Massachusetts. After black enrollment fell, Amherst College faces an identity crisis. The New York Times. Canada. Toronto. Why the winner of the election in Canada could be decided by Greater Toronto. The New York Times. Italy. A closer look at the favorite painting of Pope Francis. The New York Times. Ukraine opinion. The terrifying prospect of the Trump peace plan for Ukraine. The New York Times. Ukraine. Putin keeps pummeling Ukraine, convinced Trump is on his side. The New York Times. Ukraine senior Russian officer killed in car explosion near Moscow. The New York Times. 2C the Trump single stroke of brilliance. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, April 24, 2025. I have detested at least 3/4 of what the Trump administration has done so far, but it possesses one quality I cannot help admiring: energy. I do not know which cliche to throw at you, but it is flooding the zone, firing on all cylinders, moving rapidly on all fronts at once. It is operating at a tremendous tempo, taking the initiative in one sphere after another. The main job of Trump opponents now is to maximize the amount of friction he faces as he tries to initiate his plans. Lawsuits, leaks, non-cooperation, non-deal making, delays, getting inside his head with psychological warfare. He needs to wake up each day in a storm of troubles. Democrats will be at their best if they can defend the accomplishments of the past 250 years of American history. The Constitution. The post-war alliances. Medicare and Medicaid. A passage from the 1909 edition of the Field Service Regulations of the British Army stated success in war depends more on moral than on physical qualities. 2D Trump versus science. We explain the cuts to research by Trump. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, April 25, 2025. Late yesterday, the man whom President Trump hired to run the National Science Foundation 5 years ago has quit. He did not say why, but it was clear enough. Last weekend, Trump cut more than 400 active research awards from the NSF, and he is pressing Congress to have of the $9 billion budget to the agency, the Trump administration has targeted the American scientific enterprise, an engine of research and innovation that has thrummed for decades. It has slashed or frozen budgets at the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and NASA. It has fired or defunded thousands of researchers. The chaos is confusing. Is not science a force for good? Has not it contained disease? Would not it help us in the competition with China? We break out our macroscope to make sense of the turmoil and investment. American research funnels congressionally approved dollars to universities, national labs and institutes. This knowledge factory employs tens of thousands of researchers, draws talent from around the world, and generates scientific breakthroughs and Nobel Prizes. Science is capital by some measures. Every dollar spent on research returns at least $5 to the economy. President Trump has defunded university studies on cancer and physics. The administration has also laid off meteorologists at the National Weather Service, pandemic preparedness experts at the CDC, and black lung researchers at the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. American leaders have historically seen science as an investment in the future. Will this administration foreclose it? Now some American scientists are looking for the exits. France, Canada and other countries are courting our researchers. The Trump administration is trying to change what counts as science. One effort aims at what science should show and at achieving results agreeable to the administration. The Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wants to reopen research into a long-debunked link between vaccines and autism. He does not want to study a vaccine hesitancy. The government has expunged public datasets on air quality, earthquake intensity and seabed geology. Why cut the budget by erasing records? Perhaps the data would point toward efforts pollution reduction? Seabed mining limits? That officials might one day need to undertake. We pursue knowledge in order to act, to prevent things, to improve things, but action is expensive at a moment when the Trump administration wants the government to do as little as possible. Perhaps it is best to not even know the NIH is controlled by a small group of highly paid and unaccountable insiders. The Project 2025 authors write the regulatory work of the Environmental Protection Agency should embrace so-called citizen science and be left for the public to identify scientific flaws and research misconduct. Facts are elite, facts are fungible, facts are false, and once nothing is true, anything can be true. Elon Musk did not budget for firing workers costs money to an expert on the federal workforce estimates that the speed and chaos of cuts by Musk to the bureaucracy will cost taxpayers $135 billion this fiscal year. Elon Musk has said, without providing details, that the Department of Government Efficiency is likely to save taxpayers $150 billion. Excerpt said edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, April 24, 2025. President Trump and Elon Musk promised taxpayers big savings, maybe even a Doge dividend check in their mailboxes when the Department of Government Efficiency was let loose on the federal government. Now, as he prepares to step back from his presidential assignment to cut bureaucratic fat, Musk has said, without providing details, that Doge is likely to save taxpayers only $150 billion. That is about 15% of the $1 trillion he pledged to save, less than 8% of the $2 trillion in savings he had originally promised, and a fraction of the nearly $7 trillion the federal government spent in the 2024 fiscal year. The errors and obfuscations underlying the claims of savings by Doge are well documented. Less known are the costs Musk incurred by taking what Trump called a hatchet to government and the resulting firings, agency lockouts and building seizures that mostly wound up in court. The Partnership for Public Service, a nonprofit organization that studies the federal workforce, has used budget figures to produce a rough estimate that firings, rehirings, lost productivity and paid leave of thousands of workers will cost upward of $135 billion this fiscal year. At the Internal Revenue Service, a Doge-driven exodus of 22,000 employees would cost about $8.5 billion in revenue in 2026 alone, according to figures from the Budget Lab at Yale University. The total number of departures is expected to be as many as 32,000. Neither of these estimates includes the costs to taxpayers of defending the moves of Doge in court. Of about 200 lawsuits and appeals related to the Trump agenda, at least 30 implicate the department. Not only is Musk vastly overinflating the money he has saved, he is not accounting for the exponentially larger waste that he is creating, said Max Stier, the chief executive of the Partnership for Public Service. He has inflicted these costs on the American people, who will pay them for many years to come. Ms. Buchholz and Stier Twitter emphasized that the government is indeed inefficient and needs reform, but by gleefully torturing people. Ms. Buchholz said DOGE has hurt the ability to recruit young talented workers by the government to lead a modernization. This country historically has had an independent public service that attracts people focused on service to Americans, Ms. Buchholz said, but this administration values the kind of service you get from political appointees who serve at the pleasure of the president. 2F Florida Democratic Party is dead, state senator says as he leaves it. State Senator Jason Pizzo, the Democratic minority leader, announced in a floor speech that he was leaving the party. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, April 24, 2025. The highest-ranking Democrat in the Florida Senate announced in dramatic fashion on Thursday that he was leaving the party, the latest setback for Democrats whose influence in the state has rapidly diminished. State Senator Jason W.B. Pizzo, whose district includes parts of Miami-Dade and Broward counties in South Florida, said in a speech on the Senate floor that he was changing his voter registration to no party affiliation, the most common registration in Florida for independent voters. The Democratic Party in Florida is dead, Pizzo told his fellow lawmakers. There are good people that can resuscitate it, but they do not want it to be me. That is not convenient, that is not cool. Pizzo had signaled that he might run for governor next year. He had been visible in many high-profile debates using his background as a former prosecutor to grill Republicans, but he was also sometimes at odds with fellow Democrats on matters of law and order. Evan Power, the chairman of the Republican Party, stated that Senator Pizzo did not leave the Democratic Party, the party left him, he said, adding that the Pizzo announcement underscores the radicalization of the Democratic Party of today. Pizzo said on the Senate floor that he would not register as a Republican because the party has a lot of problems. State Representative Fentress Driscoll of Tampa, the highest-ranking Democrat in the state house, said in a statement the Democratic Party is not dead, but if it was, Jason Pizzo should consider the fact that he has been a party leader and would bear some responsibility. 2G, the terrifying prospect of the Trump peace plan for Ukraine. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, April 25, 2025. Days after threatening to abandon peace talks between Ukraine and Russia, the Trump administration last week produced the outlines of a proposal to end the war between the two countries. The proposal, which is being viewed as the Trump final offer, completely blindsided Ukraine and the European allies of America, and for good reason. It heavily favors the aggressor. Ukraine has already rejected it. In addition to reportedly freezing the current territorial lines prohibiting Ukraine from joining NATO and lifting sanctions on Russia that have been in place since 2014 when it annexed the Crimean Peninsula, the proposal offers Moscow a diplomatic gift that would set an extremely dangerous precedent: formal recognition of its control over Crimea. Acceding to Russian control of Ukraine would break within over a decade bipartisan tradition of opposing the changing of international borders by force. This policy was first articulated in 1940 after the Soviet Union annexed the three Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. More than 50 countries followed the lead of America in refusing to recognize the puppet governments installed by Moscow in the three annexed countries. The United States maintained its non-recognition policy after allying itself with the Soviet Union in June 1941. Later that year, President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Prime Minister Winston Churchill of Britain produced the Atlantic Charter, envisioning a post-war world order governed along liberal principles like self-determination, democracy and free trade. The two nations also expressed their desire to see no territorial changes that do not accord with the freely expressed wishes of the peoples concerned. But the U.S. providing formal recognition of the Crimean annexation would overturn the policy of every American president since Roosevelt. The most charitable explanation for this Trump plan is that it is a product of his impatience with diplomacy and desire to win a Nobel Peace Prize. During the 2024 presidential campaign, Trump repeatedly said that he would end the war within 24 hours of being inaugurated. When that did not happen, he tasked an envoy, the retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, with solving the conflict within 100 days. The likelier motive for the Trump proposed acquiescence to Russian colonialism is that it is a genuine reflection of his worldview, namely the principle that might makes right. Trump either does not know or does not care that this conflict began 11 years ago when Russia launched an unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, that this act was gravely immoral, never mind illegal, does not factor into the Trump geopolitical calculus. Trump is a lame duck president, which makes him more prone to take rash actions on the international stage that he might become the first American president to confer legitimacy on the annexation of territory of another country is a real and terrifying possibility. After 11 years of grinding conflict, Trump wants to end this war, but he must not mistake a temporary cessation of hostilities, which is all that his proposal would achieve with a just and lasting peace, unless Ukraine is provided with an explicit security guarantee, which in all likelihood means NATO membership. Russia will just bide its time until the moment is opportune for it to invade again. Whether Trump is in or out of office when this happens, it will destroy his legacy. 2HY Greater Toronto could decide who wins the election in Canada. The Conservatives had enjoyed a lead over Liberals in the region largely because of rising housing and food costs, but the Trump tariffs have shifted the equation. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, April 24, 2025. A year of rapidly slumping poll results for the Liberal Party that has governed Canada for nearly a decade was bad enough, but then there came the almost unthinkable: a defeat in a special election in downtown Toronto, the longtime electoral fortress of the Liberal Party. The defeat last year, many analysts believe, triggered the chain of events that led to the resignation as Prime Minister of Justin Trudeau and the federal election that will be held on Monday. Voters in Toronto had been vital to keeping Trudeau and the Liberals in power through 3 elections, so the loss of a Toronto district held by a prominent Liberal for 28 years to the Conservatives was a stunning blow and an omen of worse to come in a general election. Now, with all 343 seats in the House of Commons to be filled in the general election, the 56 at stake in the loosely defined Greater Toronto Area will likely determine who will steer Canada through a trade battle with the United States that could deal a devastating economic blow. The Conservatives had been making inroads in the crucial Toronto area with about 7 million people before Trump upended the electoral landscape by imposing tariffs on Canada. The 2 leading contenders to become the next leader of Canada are Prime Minister Mark Carney of the Liberals and Pierre Poilievre of the Conservatives. These voters who could go in any direction, while the 24 seats in Toronto have not been fertile ground for the Conservatives despite the special election result. Voters in the 32 districts in the fast-growing communities surrounding the city are not particularly attached to either major party and are up for grabs. Polls have consistently shown that Canadians believe that Carney, a former central banker with experience dealing with past financial crises, can do a better job than Poilievre in dealing with Trump. U.S. tariffs, including on vehicles and auto parts, may have a disproportionate effect on the Greater Toronto Area, which is home to many auto parts makers as well as vehicle assembly plants of General Motors and Stellantis, the owner of Chrysler. The tariffs Trump has applied on its neighbor may play a key role in determining who will capture the steep wall of Canadian voters. Analysts said to win a national election without doing well in Greater Toronto, you need to win everything but that region. 2. Putin keeps pummeling Ukraine. Convinced Trump is on his side, the concessions offered so far by Trump fall short of the stated war aims of Russia, but Putin appears certain that he has the upper hand in talks. Damage on Thursday after Russian missile strikes on Kyiv. It was the deadliest attack on in the Ukrainian capital in nearly a year. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, April 25, 2025. Putin is brutally walking a tightrope. The Russian leader appears eager to keep up talks with Trump as Moscow brims with optimism that energy deals, direct flights and the lifting of sanctions could all be in the offing. He is expected on Friday to host the White House envoy Steve Witkoff for their 4th meeting in 3 months, but Putin has cast aside the Trump calls for a quick peace in Ukraine, with the ferocity of their strikes by Russia on civilian targets increasing. Putin admitted this week that Russia had bombed a restaurant because he claimed people deserving the most serious punishment were drinking vodka there. The result is a game of chicken. Putin negotiates with Trump as the American president threatens to walk away because Putin keeps testing his patience. The Kremlin is still exuding calm confidence. 2J Even with Trump posting on social media, Vladimir stop. On Thursday, in response to the deadliest missile attack on Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, by Russia in nearly a year. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, April 24, 2025. The Ukrainian authorities said on Friday that a large-scale drone attack had killed 3, including a child, in the eastern city of Pavlograd in Russia. Experts and people close to the Kremlin say that the Putin calculus calculus is simple. Until now the Russian president has been convinced that he has more to gain on the battlefield than by accepting the deal Trump appears to be offering. Even taking a temporary ceasefire Putin believes would mean surrendering so much negotiating leverage that it would only make sense to do so after major concessions from Ukraine and the West. At the same time, Putin, a leader who likes to keep his options open and hedge his bets, does not want to foreclose the possibility of a war-ending settlement. And Trump, given his obvious sympathy for Putin and distaste for President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, has given the Russian leader plenty of reason to think he can push the envelope. Putin would be ready for a Ukraine deal because doing so would unlock the vast benefits of cooperating with Trump, including sanctions relief, the return of frozen Russian assets, renewed direct flights to the West, and joint energy projects in the Arctic. The foreign policy preconditions for not stopping fighting have been created in the form of the new President of the United States. 2K senior Russian officer killed in car explosion near Moscow. The death of the general is the latest in a series of fatalities involving opponents of Ukraine inside Russia. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity. In relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 non-profit organization. The New York Times, April 25, 2025. A senior Russian military commander was killed on Friday in a car explosion in a suburb of Moscow, investigators said. The Investigative Committee of Russia, the Russian equivalent to the FBI, issued a statement identifying the officer as Lieutenant General Yaroslav Moskalik, a senior figure in the Russian general staff who was directly involved in planning operations. The investigators said that they had opened a criminal inquiry into the explosion, which took place in the town of Balashikha east of Moscow. The explosion came as Russian state news agencies reported that Steve Witkoff, the Trump special envoy, was probably in Moscow. Witkoff was expected to conduct another round of high-profile negotiations with President Vladimir Putin over ending the war in Ukraine and re-establishing the bilateral relationship between Russia and the United States. Putin has cast aside the Trump calls for a quick peace in Ukraine, and airstrikes by Russia on civilian targets appear to be increasing. The death of General Moskalik is the latest in a series of fatalities among the opponents of Kyiv inside Russia. 3 headlines. The New York Times, April 24, 2025. Juilliard plans a $550 million drive to go tuition-free. The New York Times. Man charged with arson in West New Jersey wildfire. The New York Times. The not-so-secret other life of Penn Station, the dance studio of the people. The New York Times. PepsiCo cuts growth forecast amid tariffs and slowed consumer spending. The New York Times. Stocks extend gains as investors weigh Fed rates and tariff talk. The New York Times. The cybercriminals who organized a $243 million crypto heist. The New York Times. Trump cuts threaten agency running Meals on Wheels. The New York Times. Trump tells Putin to stop after deadly Russian attack on Kyiv. The New York Times. U.S. sidelines lawyers who exposed flaws in anti-congestion pricing case. The New York Times. U.S. urges Japan and South Korea to commit to Alaska LNG project. The New York Times. 3B. Juilliard plans a $550 million drive to go tuition-free. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity. In relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 non-profit organization. The New York Times, April 24, 2025. The Juilliard School, one of the most prestigious conservatories in the world, plans to go tuition-free for all of its students. The school announced on Thursday and has begun a $550 million fundraising drive to finance the effort. The tuition-free policy is meant to make Juilliard accessible to a broader range of students and to ease the burden on graduates hoping to pursue careers in the arts where salaries can be meager. The fundraising campaign will be one of the largest in the 120-year history of Juilliard. If a student can get into Juilliard and it is hard to get into Juilliard, it cannot be about the money, said president of the school. Money cannot be the determining factor of having the opportunity to come to Juilliard. To be in New York City at Lincoln Center and to fulfill that dream that empowers art itself. Juilliard officials did not provide a timeline for putting the new policy in place, saying only that it would be a multi-year effort. The school said it has received about $180 million in early commitments, including a pledge of $130 million from the board of Juilliard. The cost of attending Juilliard has at times been a point of contention between administrators and students. In 2021, students led protests against a planned tuition increase, demanding that the school freeze its tuition. Juilliard would not be the only conservatory to go tuition-free. The renowned Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia, which is much smaller than Juilliard with about 160 students, has not charged tuition since 1928, 4 years after it opened its doors. 3C man charged with arson in vast New Jersey wildfire. A 19-year-old was accused of lighting a bonfire and leaving before it was extinguished, sparking one of the largest blazes in the state in decades. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, April 24, 2025. A New Jersey man was charged Thursday with starting a bonfire this week that sparked the Jones Road wildfire, one of the largest wildfires in the state in almost 20 years, officials said. The man, Joseph Kling, 19, of Waretown in Ocean Township, faces charges of arson and aggravated arson in connection with the fire. He had left the bonfire unattended in the Forked River Mountains Wilderness area in Ocean County. The authorities said the wildfire, which was first spotted from atop a remote 204-foot fire tower in Ocean County on Tuesday morning, grew to 15,000 acres over 3 days. It shut down a stretch of one of the busiest highways in the state, prompted thousands of evacuations, destroyed a commercial building, and threatened air quality from the Pinelands area in southern New Jersey to New York City. The blaze was about 50% contained by Thursday afternoon, according to the New Jersey Forest Fire Service, which continues to use fire engines, bulldozers, helicopters, and ground crews to fight it. Smoky conditions will continue this week, but the fire should be brought under control by the weekend when rain is expected. We are not fully out of the woods. 3D The Not-So-Secret Other Life of Penn Station. The dance studio of the people, smooth floors, public restrooms, a built-in audience. The lower level of Moynihan Hall doubles as a rehearsal space for a variety of dance groups, including K-pop, salsa, and Brazilian zouk. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, April 24, 2025. As the train to Ronkonkoma pulled into Penn Station, a young man threw his arms up, bending his elbows like goalposts, but he was not a frustrated commuter. He was dancing, and he was not the only one. Passengers flowed out of elevators, some stopping to watch, some rushing by with their luggage. If you ever want to find the culmination of what New York is as a culture but expressing itself through dance, this is a good place to find it. Penn Station, the transit hub for hurrying commuters and Amtrak riders, has a side gig. Its wide lower-level corridor, specifically the passageway leading to the Moynihan train hall from track 7 to track 16 of the Long Island Railroad, is an unlikely dance studio. It is officially called the West End Concourse. The Moynihan train hall is easily accessible. The floors are spacious and smooth. There are public restrooms, which is a rarity in New York City. Not shy dance crew had gone unbothered for the most part, but had been asked at times to turn the music down. The concourse lives in a kind of gray area. Penn Station is owned by Amtrak, but the passageway is managed and policed by the Long Island Railroad, which has its own rules of conduct, as does the adjacent New York City subway. And unlike buskers who apply to perform in the subways, these dancers do not fall under a clear jurisdiction. They do not perform for tips. They dance for joy, for camaraderie. A 32-year-old dancer on a break smiled breathlessly as he gestured at the commuters and spectrum of dancers. You feel like you are really part of the city, he said. 3. Even snacks would not make consumers feel better about the economy. The earnings call of PepsiCo pointed to anxious consumers, why sales had slowed. Echoing comments by Chipotle and Procter & Gamble, edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, April 24, 2025. Relative to where we were 3 months ago, we probably are not feeling as good about the consumer now, the chief financial officer of PepsiCo said. The most recent survey from the Conference Board showed consumer confidence tumbling in March to its lowest level since January 2021. Americans are increasingly anxious about their jobs and finances, the business group reported, hoping to entice consumers who are tightening wallets. Executives at PepsiCo said it was offering less expensive, under $2 individual bags of snacks along with smaller snack packs in stores. PepsiCo said it had calculated into its lower profit estimates the higher costs associated with the tariffs. Analysts had been keeping a close eye on the impact that tariffs would have on the food and beverage industry, specifically a 25% tariff on imported aluminum. And while Wall Street analysts have been watching for potential fallout of the Trump trade wars on sales of American brands in key international markets, specifically Europe and China, PepsiCo said its global markets performed well in the first quarter. In the United States, the popularity of using Ozempic and other weight loss drugs has curbed sales for for snacks and shifted purchases to smaller portions. The chief executive of PepsiCo told analysts PepsiCo is also navigating demands by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This week Kennedy declared that sugar is poison during a news conference and said he had an understanding with major food manufacturers to remove petroleum-based food colorings from their products by the end of 2026. PepsiCo had been an industry leader in reducing sodium and sugar in products, and more than 60% of its business was from products with no artificial colors. 3F stocks extend gains as investors weigh Fed rates and tariff talk. Stocks extend gains as investors weigh Fed rates and tariff talk after an early wobble. Markets resumed rising after Chinese officials pushed back on comments from Trump and others suggesting that tariffs may ease via negotiations. Excerpt edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, April 24, 2025. Stocks rose on Thursday, extending a two-day rally as investors hope for an easing of the Trump trade wars and weigh comments on its impact from a Federal Reserve official. The S&P 500 gained more than 1% after stalling in early trading. The index has seesawed this week. Monday saw a sharp sell-off followed by 2 days of sizable gains after Trump on Tuesday said that he was prepared to be very nice in trade negotiations with China. The rally then paused after officials in China said they were not holding talks with the United States about easing trade tensions, but indexes continued to swing on scraps of information about tariffs and monetary policy in the absence of concrete developments about the escalating global trade war. On Thursday, Christopher Waller, a Fed governor, told Bloomberg that the economic hit from the Trump tariffs will take time to show up in the data, suggesting that the central bank is not poised to lower interest rates soon. A spokesman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China said China would only engage in talks under certain conditions. The day before, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent dismissed speculation that Trump was considering unilaterally lowering tariffs on China. "I do not think either side believes that the current tariff levels are sustainable," he said. Big companies reporting their latest earnings warned that tariffs and economic uncertainty would dent profits in the months ahead. PepsiCo and Merck cut their earnings forecasts while American Airlines withdrew its previous forecast for the rest of the year until the economic outlook becomes clearer. Shares in Amazon were up more than 2%, as were shares in the chip giant Nvidia. The US dollar fell against several major currencies including the euro, the British pound and the Japanese yen. The yield on 10-year Treasury bonds, which move inversely to prices, fell to 4.32%. Oil futures recovered some ground. Stocks in Britain, France and Germany were roughly flat. 3G, they stole $250 million in crypto and got caught within a month. How luxury cars, $500,000 bar tabs and a mysterious kidnapping attempt helped investigators unravel the heist of a lifetime. RAWSEP view. This story illustrates some dangers of cryptocurrency, a system which Trump is promoting. Excerpt edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, April 24, 2025. On August 25, 2024, Vice President at Morgan Stanley in New York and his wife were house hunting in Danbury, Connecticut. Vice President at Morgan Stanley in New York. Their car was rammed by a Honda Civic at the same time. A van cut in front, trapping the couple. 6 men dressed in black and wearing masks emerged from, forced the couple from their car, dragging them into the van. Several witnesses saw the attack and called 911. Some of them, including an off-duty FBI agent who lived nearby and happened to be at the scene, trailed the van and the Honda, relaying the movements of the vehicle to the police. The FBI agent managed to obtain partial license plate numbers. After a mile, the van crashed in. 4 suspects fled on foot but were captured this year. 5 of the 6 Florida men pleaded guilty to federal kidnapping and conspiracy charges. They could face 15 years in prison. In a Hartford court in January, one 19-year-old apologized for his actions, saying he was helping another man carry out a vendetta, although he did not elaborate. In February, a 22-year-old Georgia man was indicted in connection with the kidnapping plot. According to the federal criminal complaint, Schwab had an altercation with Virchetl in a Miami nightclub a month before the kidnapping, and he helped fund the plot and arrange transportation and lodging for the attackers. He pleaded not guilty on March 25. Zach XBT posted a new message on X chronicling his investigation into the stolen crypto. Update: Wiz Virchetl was arrested. He wrote, "Here is his mugshot." The photo attached featured a young man in a white t-shirt. The charge, listed in jail records, as a federal misdemeanor offense but does not specify what that offense is. According to Zach XBT, the stolen Bitcoin he traced to addresses belonging to Chetl is now in a wallet controlled by law enforcement. The Matt Gray Lamborghini Urus, which the vice president of Morgan Stanley was driving the day of the kidnapping, is still sitting as evidence in a secure police lot in Danbury. It is the same Lamborghini their son once drove to school.
1 Introduction. RAWSEP view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom. The Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP view. PurpleAir PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.